there were parts where I was just like, girl, stand up. Stand the hell up. He don't deserve you. But she's a down bitch. It's like, it's so quick for you to go from being a down bitch to a dumb bitch. And she was really riding that line. Matter of fact, she did cross over to the dumb bitch, but you're going to have to read that for yourself. Hi, hello, and welcome to the Cozy Little Book Club. I'm your host, Taylor. Thanks so much for joining. The book that I'm talking about today is a blast from the past and dives deep into the heart of the Harlem Renaissance. In fact, this book is nearly 100 years old. So today we're getting into a very peculiar book. So I will say that this is the second book from my mini-series, Controversial Cool. And before we actually just dive into it, I want to take a deep breath. So you and me, we're going to take a deep breath. Because this book is really like that, okay? This whole thing is really like that. So I wouldn't say I'm excited to talk to you about it, but I guess I am kind of excited to talk to you about it because I really want to have a dialogue about this book and this whole scenario. So I'll stop being elusive and I'll tell you what it's called. This book is nearly 100 years old, being published in 1926, and it's about the Black experience during the heart of the Harlem Renaissance. Wow, that doesn't sound like that'll be controversial. There's more. The name of the book, and I do want to give a preemptive trigger warning because it's just very aggressive. But the name of the book is called Nigger Heaven. Yeah. So we have a lot to discuss, obviously. Now, obviously, this is a very controversial title, but I do want to give a little bit of history before I dive into what the book is about. The author of this book was a German-American man by the name of Carl Van Vechten. In other words, he was white when he wrote this book. Yeah. This book, again, was published in 1926 and was supposed to be a talk about the Negro life during the height of the Harlem Renaissance, but also a love story. A love story. Ugh. This white man decided that he wanted to talk about Negro life during the 1920s, and that's what he did. So don't block me for the name of this book, but this is one of the versions that I have. I'm sorry. This is the version that I have, but this book has been printed on very different, covers. There's a few different covers of this book. And yeah, it's not that thick, but it is interesting. So I'll just cover the eye. Yeah, so this is Nigger Heaven. And I want y'all to see Carl Van Vechten. That is not a Black name. Ciao. Okay. So yeah, brace yourselves for this story. I feel like it's obvious that there will be some trigger warnings. So I do want you to be mindful that this book is filled with, maybe not filled with, but there are a lot of racial slurs, epithets, drug use, violence, and murder, just for a little razzle dazzle. Also, I won't be saying the N-word throughout this review because it's just, the hard ER is just so aggressive, but it is riddled throughout this story. So don't fret. It's not going to be crazy. I mean, the story is crazy, but I'm not going to be crazy about the story, okay? Or the use of the word, I should say. So with that, let's get into the story. The story starts off with a short prologue about a very skeezy man by the name of Anatoly Longfellow. Anatoly is a very attractive man per the girls on Lenox Avenue in Harlem, and they all want to be around him. And he has this kind of notoriety for being a creeper, which is basically someone who sleeps with other people's women. He just home wrecking everybody, and they don't care. The women love him, the husbands hate him. So yeah, he's known as a creeper who struts his stuff through Harlem on various avenues, and he just got He has big dick energy, to be honest. Like, Anatoly got big dick energy. He has BDE for sure. He's known for sleeping with other people's wives and slinking through the night. Hence his nickname, Creeper. In this prologue, he meets a woman named Ruby who has been waiting for her chance to get with the Creeper. And so she pays him. Truthfully, it couldn't be me. It could never be me. That's insane. I'm listening and I'm definitely judging you. I'm judging you, Ruby. Anyway, the rest of the story is split into 2 books, or 2 parts. One from the perspective of Mary Love and the other from the perspective of Byron Kaysen. Mary is an educated librarian who loves to see the various shades of Black and brown people thriving in and around Harlem. She lovingly refers to them as the rainbow hue. While she admires and appreciates the glitz and glam of Harlem at the time, she's pretty low-key and stays to herself. She lives with her best friend, Olive, who often passes as white. In fact, Mary sometimes passes as white too, and if not white, she passes as some kind of Latin, Spanish person. That may not seem like very critical to the story, but we'll go into that later. But with them being able to be kind of white passing, their experience of Harlem and just being Black anywhere is a little different than other people's. And they have a few privileges that others may not. Mary meets Byron at a lavish weekend of parties on Long Island, hosted by her dear friend and ex-dance hall superstar, Adora Boniface. Usually, Mary is put off or uninterested in men, and I'll be honest, I thought she might have been asexual for the first half of this book. But that was until she met Byron. She was intrigued by him as soon as she laid eyes on him, and the feeling was mutual. Byron was visiting from Philly and was hoping to move to New York with plans of being a writer. With Mary being a librarian and her love for books, naturally, she was even more interested in him. And as I mentioned, Byron was just in town visiting, so their meeting was brief, but it was very lasting for Mary. The first book from Mary's perspective pretty much talks about her day-to-day life and her perspective of the world around her. Sometimes she doesn't feel like she's really connected to the Black savage part of her because she can't Charleston and doesn't feel as passionately as other Black people around her. Now that's how you know a Black person didn't write that, because why would you say that? Eventually, Byron makes his way to Harlem and he finds her, and to make a long story short, they fall in love. Everything is good until it isn't. At a party, Byron meets another woman who is golden brown, which apparently is one of the biggest prerequisites of dating for him. And he is just absolutely enamored with her. And her name is Laska Sartorius. Mind you, he did come to the party with Mary. Just trifling. And that's when we get to the second part of the book, from Byron's perspective. Now that he's in Harlem, he's trying to find a job, he's college educated, and he keeps getting denied. Mostly because he's Black and white people don't want to work with him. He doesn't want to work an elevator job because he thinks it's below him. And then he doesn't want to reach out to the connections that his father has because he thinks that they're snobs. So he really ain't really looking for a job. He ain't really being serious. He just getting by and enjoying all the sights and sounds of Harlem. And Mary, being the down, solid-ass bitch that she is, tries to keep him motivated and encourages him to write about his life, his perspective, about Harlem, the things that are around him. But instead, he whines, complains, and just keeps picking arguments with her. And on top of that, he won't stop calling Laska, calling her up all the time. He can't get her out of his mind. Poor Mary. Even though Laska is never around, never home, doesn't answer the phone, he still can't get her off his mind. And I should also note that Laska is a rich bitch, okay? I'm talking she's in luxury. I'm talking Rolls Royces. I'm talking pigeon feathers. Pigeon feathers? Not pigeon feathers. Peacock feathers and ostrich feathers. Pigeon feathers is not rich. Do people use pigeon feathers? Like, what would you use it for? I don't know. Pigeons are so gross, especially in New York. Ew, yuck. So anyway, she's a rich bitch with clean feathers. she be rolling around in luxury and finery, and Byron, he don't know how to act. He like, damn, I ain't never been here before. And it's like, act like you know. Act like you know, act like you know, act like you know, act like you know. Like, act like you've been somewhere, boy. Anyway, they end up hooking up, and then things go awry very quickly because that's instant karma for your ass. Cheating on that good woman who holds you down while you bitch and moan. Ugh, yuck. And I think I'll leave the summary at that because the rest of the story is honestly so insane that you should just read it for yourself. I would say that the themes of this book are racial identity and class tensions, Harlem as a central hub for Black life, and art and authenticity. So I low-key want to apologize for how long I feel like this might be, but I'm actually not sorry. This is a discussion that needs to be had because it's very interesting, and people read this book in college, and I would love to have a lot of engagement and dialogue behind this book. I don't know anybody who's actually read the book except for one person. There's just so much to discuss with this book. So buckle up, motherfucker. First of all, this book is very hard to find in English, apparently. A lot of it was published in German, which is funny because Carl Van Vechten is from Iowa. Yes, he's German, but he's American. Make it make sense. It don't. So obviously this book is very wild, like incredibly wild. But it took me so long to read this book based on the spelling alone. Because it's written by a white man who is trying to speak like a Black person, how some Black people spoke at the time, it's just difficult to read at first. I want to give another little history lesson because I know they're trying to take away Black history in the schools, but a lot of Black people migrated from the South because New York and Harlem was a free man state, and it's supposed to be a place where Black people were thriving because they were thriving. That's why it's called the Harlem Renaissance. It was a time of Black art, music, literature, just Black people were just doing their thing out there. And it was really like a boom. And that was about from, I would say, 1918 till a little after the Great Depression, which is super sad. So it wasn't very long, but it was very impactful. And a lot of influences came from that time. So we are grateful for the limited time, but we are grateful for the time of the Harlem Renaissance. There are like a lot of musicians and a lot of jazz and a lot of things like that. Just like, just a good time to be, Josephine Baker, just a good time to be a Black entertainer, artist, like writer, all these things. And it was just a good economic boom for Black people. Anyway, I say all that to say that a lot of people from the South migrated up to New York. And so some of what Carl Van Vechten was spelling out were some country folks. They didn't have as much education a lot of times. Not everybody. I don't want to group everybody like that, but a lot of them didn't have a lot of education. So they spoke differently. And I want to read you some of it, because reading it was very difficult because I've read books from the past and it just wasn't as hard to read as this was because he's not Black. So, it makes a difference. So here's one, and it's like on the first few pages for real. So here we go. It's about Anatoly, our creeper guy. Well, you found it off in a gal's front door. Coming out, going in. I went out the back window. Her daddy done come home without writing. Hush my mouth. I don't mean maybe. And there were just clumps of that. It was just hard to read. When I'm like, oh, okay, my brain is honestly, it took me a few times reading it to understand what they were saying. So it was just different. So I want to actually show it to you because I feel like me reading it doesn't show. So yeah, you see it? I hope it's not backwards. Is it backwards for y'all? If it is, my bad. But it's just hard to read. Okay. And thankfully, most of the book wasn't like that, but there were some parts where I had to keep rereading it. And I'm like, oh, this is what this meant. So it was difficult to say the least. Okay. And also, shout out to Carl Van Vechten because he has so graciously included a glossary of common Negro words and phrases at the beginning of the book. And I want to show that to y'all. This book is crazy. I will definitely say that I learned some new words, and I did reference the glossary a few times while reading because there were just some words I'm like, I don't know what this is. What are these terms? I'm going to read you some of the words and some of the definitions. All right, so we got the blue vein circle, which is a bunch of mixed people who don't want Black people to be in their group. Did not know that was a thing. And it's crazy because you know about that one drop. That's crazy. Then we got creeper, Anatoly, a man who invades another's marital rights. Then we got dinged, which is another word for Negro. We got faggity fagad, don't cancel me. This is in the book. Faggity fagad, which is a white person. Then we got a lot of racial slurs that I will not be repeating. We also have an ofe, which is another word for white person. We have, what is it? Where's the one for lesbian? Oh, a bull dyker. Oh my God. We got charcoal to also represent a Negro. It's just, it's crazy. This white man wrote this. It's crazy. It's crazy. Ooh, okay. And then we just got, there's just so many problematic words. But I will say one thing that I did think was funny was the definition for CPT. Black people know what I'm talking about. That's colored people time. And I think that's crazy, hilarious, and also kind of beautiful, but mostly hilarious that Black people have been so late for well over 100 years. That this term of colored people time has transcended generations of just Black people being late. So, you know, I think stuff like that is beautiful to me because it's like, okay, these are, I won't say traditional, but these are cultural terms and definitely part of the AAV. So it was just hilarious. And I did feel like some type of way this white man was talking about colored people time, but also like, I'm just glad that we as a society and in this generation are still, not that I'm glad that we're still late, but I'm glad that we're still using this term. And it's been passed on from a long time. Now, I didn't mention all of the characters in the story, just a few of the main ones, but there were definitely some interesting characters within this story. Also, I want to say that this book seems like it's written like a play because you have the glossary, then you have a list of the most important characters, which I think is debatable because some of them were not that important. And then the book, again, is split into two parts, book 1 and book 2. But one of the people I didn't mention earlier but would like to highlight right now is Richard Fort Sill, who they call Dick. I don't know how white people, and I will say that because I don't know any Black people whose name is Richard that has gone by the name Dick. If you know him, point him out. Send him this video. I don't know. I don't care. But I don't know anybody like that, and I've never seen it anywhere until this book, which is, again, another indicator that a Black person didn't write this. Because I've never once heard Black people wanting to be a Black person, Black man wanting to be referred to as Dick. I don't know. Very interesting. But anyway, Dick is Black, and he plans to go white. And what that means is he plans on getting married to a white woman because he is just tired of the struggle, which I can't blame him for being tired of the struggle. But one, that's manipulative. Two, when you have a baby, because you know how genes work in genetics, how you gonna explain that Black baby to your white wife? Are you finna flip the wool over her and be like, you cheating whore? It's giving bogus. It's very bogus. And also this book is just like riddled with like self-loathing, like super sad, like just tears my heart apart. It's very sad. Dick is white passing and he's very grateful for it. And Dick got this idea to go white because a black lady who was also passing was flaunting around her new white fiance. I just don't see that being like that going well, just because that's going to be a surprise should they have children, more than likely. And Dick was like, shit, let me try. And that was just like funny to me because, again, this shows how being white or adjacent to white gets you access to things that it won't for other people. So again, these are historical facts. Like, these are things. Like, there's definitely stories of actual people who have went on passing as white, even if they're not even black. It's just interesting, like, how your proximity to whiteness equate to success. And I can say even now, some people do that. Like, this is not anything surprising. Like, you know what Kanye said? When you get on, you leave your ass for a white girl. He leaving your black ass. So, like, now you're on. Now you got to leave shorty who was holding you down. But again, no need to elaborate. This goes on. This is nothing new. I want to get into Byron's ass. Again, not a fan. And before y'all come for me, if y'all been watching my videos, I don't love that I don't like a lot of male characters. But they're written in a very unlikable way. Like, Byron was toxic. He was incredibly toxic. It was honestly giving Lawrence and Issa from Insecure. Now, I will say that it's been a few years since I've watched it, and I'm way overdue for a rewatch. But it was giving that. You know, Mary's trying to encourage his unemployed ass. He's not really putting in a lot of effort. He thinks he's above things, but then he feels plagues because he ain't getting jobs because he's black. And don't crucify me. I agree, especially at that time. It is hard to get a job for a black man. Like, even now it is. There's plenty of studies. I'm not going to read them all, but there's plenty of studies that show that. But he wasn't trying to make any kind of income, and he had connections. That's what was annoying. His dad was somebody, I don't know, but he had a lot of connections, and he didn't want to utilize those connections or the letters that his dad sent him off with, because he thought the people that he didn't want to kiss the ring. He didn't want to feel like he had to kiss their ass to these snobbish people, which is crazy because you ain't got no money. You ain't got no money, and you just engaged to you just proposed to marry. Like, it's not computing. It's not making sense. You need money. What are you doing? And so, like, you always come to Mary house so her and Olive can cook for your ass. Like, what you do? Like, And you couldn't even hold her down. You couldn't even hold her down while she said, like, she tried to motivate you, but you just wanted to push against the grain. I don't have anything to write about. And honestly, throughout the first part of the book, I'm like, is Byron a boy? Is he actually even a writer? He hasn't written anything since I read this book. And like, the one thing he writes, it's trash and nobody likes it. And they're like, this book sucks. So like, he actually, well, I won't get into it, but yeah, like, are you really like, that's why I said one of the themes is about art and authenticity, because are you actually being authentic? You just saying you want to be a writer, but anytime somebody's asking, like, what are you going to write about? Like, I don't know, there's nothing to write about. Like, bro, you're black in Harlem during the height of economic success. There's cabarets, there's gambling, there's Bolito, there's a lot of things to write about, and you can't find nothing, and instead you want to write a story about a white person. Choices were made. That was a choice. So yeah, I don't really feel bad for him, because what are you doing? But still, Mary wanted to hold it down, and there were parts where I was just like, girl, stand up. Stand the hell up. He don't deserve you. But she's a down bitch. It's like, it's so quick for you to go from being a down bitch to a dumb bitch. And she was really riding that line. Matter of fact, she did cross over to a dumb bitch, but you're going to have to read that for yourself. And it was honestly when he was treating her and leaving her for Alaska when Mary went from a down bitch to a dumb bitch because you crying. This, but also like I don't want to give you everything, but like I said, I thought that Mary might have been asexual because she didn't like a lot of men. And so like for this to be like her first love and he's just doing her so dirty and just always starting arguments with her, it was just like, girl, there are other men in Harlem. I can't wait for whoever watches this to read the book because I really want to kiki about Laska. Laska, I don't know how to say her name. She was, I don't know what I would call her, but she was one of them ones. And that was just a crazy, really quick arc from how her and Byron kind of pandered off. It was really interesting. But if y'all did read it, let's talk about it in the comments. I want to talk about it. Let's kiki, but don't do spoilers, but let's talk about it. So the book that I have is only 186 pages. And from the beginning, it says that there's a note from the author, but there just definitely isn't one. My book ends at 186 and the note from the author is supposed to be on 187. So I don't know with the English reprints if they just didn't have it, but I was really curious to know like Carl Van Vechten's thought process because my one simple question is why? Why did you feel the need to do this? People were telling him you shouldn't do that. You definitely shouldn't name it that way. But he was like, hey, y'all, this is my book. I'm gonna do what I want. And so I'm like, okay, again, choices were made. Yeah. But I do want to know, like, what was the deal? What was the purpose? Why? So as I said, this book is a part of my controversial or cool series. And the verdict is in. I think this book is absolutely controversial. What? I feel like it's a given that it's controversial on so many levels. From the title to the subject matter to him thinking what Black people thought and how they felt was not only inauthentic, but it was problematic. Simple. There were many times where there were just crazy bouts of self-loathing. And don't get me wrong, the Black identity in America at the beginning of this time, or just when Black people were coming, was very difficult. Like, just think about all the traumas, and you know, generational trauma is a real thing. Those things really have people feeling some type of way. Like, if you got people telling you who are above you that you are unworthy, your Black skin is ugly, and you should be doing crazy things to make yourself conform more, like, yeah, that's gonna affect your self-esteem. And so self-loathing in this time period, or even now, is not uncommon. It's just really sad. But I didn't even know, but I will give the book this, that I didn't know that people were bleaching their skin in the 1920s. That is so sad and concerning. And people still bleach their skin. I did a show that I was working on about colorism, and this girl was bleaching her skin proudly, you know, and that's something she got to work on if she wants to. But it's not a new concept. But I just didn't like the way he talked about self-loathing. And I'm going to read y'all something from Mary's book. Okay, this is kind of long, but bear with me. This love of drums, of exciting rhythm, this naive delight in glowing color, the color that exists only in cloudless tropical climates, this warm sexual emotion, all of these were hers only through a mental understanding. Blah, 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 blah. Mary's heart went out to her. Why? Mary asked herself, is this denied to me? We are all savages, she repeated to herself, all apparently but me. So, like, this is her talking about, like, how she doesn't fit in with the Black people around her because they know how to do the Charleston, which is crazy. And she appreciates spirituals, and she doesn't really want to be around the jazz clubs and things like that. And she doesn't want to kiss men and share intimate times with them because she's just doing her thing. And that's okay. Like, I just feel like to equate to being a savage and wanting to be a savage is so not Black. I don't think any Black person really wants to be called like a savage or referred to as themselves as a savage. I mean, granted, Rihanna is a little different, but I'm saying, like, it was in this particular conversation, she's talking about like just being erratic and, you know, feeling all these motions. And I don't know how to explain it, but I hope y'all understand what I'm getting at. But no, Black people don't talk about themselves like that. That is crazy. Okay. It's wild. And especially at that time where the word savage, how it was meant, it's problematic. It's crazy. And then also at one point, Laska, she hates Black people. She's like, I don't think that being Black really means anything. I am Black, but I would never like use that. I get anything I want. And you know, she had pretty privilege. She had a lot of other things, but that's a whole, again, we comment in the caption, put a comment down to talk about Laska's ass, because I want to talk about her. She is somebody to be studied. And I think that she should have been in the book more, but she was also problematic. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I love her, but I have a lot of thoughts about her. But anyway, yeah. At one point, she was telling Byron, like, yes, I want to be your slave and smack me. You're so strong. And it's like, oh, girl. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that people say these things now. Like, it's not like something super insane. But back then at the time, with how language was progressing and the climate of race at the time, I mean, even now, but then especially it just wasn't appropriate. And so, yeah. Tis, Carl. Tis. But yeah, so like, even though Black people are struggling, I definitely don't want to read it from the perspective of a white man who thinks he knows what Black people are going through. You don't know. You will never know how Black people feel. You might be around them, but you're never going to know it. You're never going to experience it firsthand. You might secondhand experience it. Yeah, my friend got racially profiled, but that's not the same thing. You know what I mean? So I would be remiss if I were to say that I don't think that Carl had any right to write this story, but he was heavily involved. I don't know if he was heavily involved, but he was around a lot of prominent figures during the Harlem Renaissance. So Carl was into music, and that's what initially landed him in New York. And eventually he went on to become a photographer. And because he did hang out with a lot of Black people, he did take a lot of photos of very prominent Black figures at the time. So yes, he was around some of these characters, but at the end of the day, he doesn't know what's actually going on. He could never know what's actually going on. And when this book was initially released 99 years ago, there was obviously some criticism and intrigue from both Black and white people. For white people, they thought it was like a really good inside look of what Black people are dealing with and how they're living in Harlem, which is also problematic. Some of Carl's Black supporters were Langston Hughes, who actually wrote all of the songs that are featured throughout this book, as well as Zora Neale Hurston. And Zora Neale Hurston actually said, and I quote, "If Carl Van Vechten was a people instead of a person, I could then say, these are my people." And I get that this book did highlight some of the liveliness of that time and that era, but I guess I'm going to have to go with one of the critics, W.E.B. Du Bois, who said that it was a, quote, melodramatic blow to the face. And I agree, because I really feel like instead of these people being characters, they felt like caricatures. That was kind of hard. So with all of that information, I'm curious to know, would y'all invite Carl Van Vechten to the cookout or not? And I also would like to know whether you think this book is controversial or cool. So I know that this was a doozy, quite a long episode, but I hope that you enjoyed it. And more than enjoyed it, I hope that it gave you some thought-provoking internal dialogue, like makes you think, because it's really interesting. I would say that this book was odd, peculiar, and admittedly interesting, and definitely something to experience yourself. I will give this book a 3 out of 5 golden bookmarks. I just feel like no matter how much I talk about it, you would have to read and experience it for yourself so that you can come to your own conclusion about it. And finally, that wraps up another episode of the Cozy Little Book Club. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you've made it to the end, please leave a little stack of book emoji. And if you read the book, please, please, please comment down below. I really want to hear your thoughts about it, and I really want to talk about Alaska. Let's talk about her. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you know each week when we have a new episode. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you have a great day. And remember, when you open a book, you open your mind. Until next time.